Have you ever asked yourself, how could I have stayed for so long? Why did I ignore my gut when it screamed at me to walk away from this person? In today's episode, we're diving into the exact psychological concept that will explain why you saw the red flags and stayed anyway. So, by the end of the show, you can finally turn down the volume on that self blame and replace it with a voice of understanding and self compassion instead. Let's go ahead and dive in. Welcome back to Restoring Resilience, and today I want to talk to you about one of the number one questions every narcissistic abuse survivor asks at some point. How did I not see this sooner? Why didn't I listen to my gut? Why didn't I walk away when I saw the red flags? And I've noticed that my clients, members of my healing community, especially start asking this question more the more you see what you're dealing with. So the more you recognize the toxic traits and the narcissism in this person, the more you start looking back over the whole relationship and wondering, how did I get here? Like, how did so much happen that I didn't fully see at the time? And that's often where a lot of the self-blame and shame starts to come in as well. Because one, you start seeing the abuses and the betrayals, and you feel ashamed that you stayed and put up with that kind of treatment. And two, you also recognize that part of you did see it. Like part of you knew something was off from the beginning, but it's like you couldn't see clearly enough to make a different choice. But what if I told you that these decisions were not made because you're foolish or stupid or naive, but because your brain was trying to protect you? What if I told you that your brain was doing exactly what it was designed to do to keep you safe? And that brings us to the psychological concept we're going to break down today, which is called betrayal blindness. But before we get there, we need to talk about what betrayal trauma is, how it works, and why it leads to something like betrayal blindness. So, how can you live in something that is objectively a betrayal and still doubt yourself and minimize it and explain it away? That's where we have to understand betrayal trauma. And betrayal trauma is a specific type of trauma that happens when you're betrayed by a person or an institution that you depend on for survival or that you're attached to. So we're talking about people like parents, caregivers, romantic partners, close friends, or even institutions like school systems, churches, the military. And because of that, there has to be some level of trust in that relationship or system to function in it. So think of how children have to rely on their parents. It's not really a choice whether they become connected to them or attached to them or rely on them for their survival. They literally have to rely on their parents for survival. If you have a job, you have to have some level of trust that you're going to get paid. If you're married, you have to have some level of trust that that relationship is going to be monogamous. And so trust is baked into the relationship. And because we should be able to trust that person or that institution, betrayal becomes possible. So betrayal trauma includes things like childhood abuse, neglect, emotional abuse. Of course, it includes things like affairs, infidelity in a romantic relationship. It includes repeated patterns of lying, manipulation, gaslighting, even things that people often minimize, like, they were just being honest or, they twist things sometimes. Those are betrayals because at the core of all of this, it's a violation of trust. Now, here's what makes betrayal trauma really unique. It is independent of your reaction to it. And this is really important, so please hear me when I say this. Because most trauma frameworks are based on how you respond. So, for example, to meet criteria for PTSD, there are certain symptoms you have to have. Intrusive thoughts, avoidance, hypervigilance, things like that. So people often think, well, if I'm okay, like I'm doing okay, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I didn't really go through any kind of trauma. Betrayal trauma doesn't work like that. Betrayal trauma is a trauma regardless of whether you feel like it is or not, because the nature of betrayal trauma is that your brain tries to make sure you don't see the betrayal as a betrayal. So the brain's attempt to not see the betrayal is a trauma response in and of itself. So actually, your lack of reaction to it, your confusion, your minimization, like they couldn't help it, they just had a bad childhood, they just don't communicate well, is proof of the trauma. Because when it comes to betrayal trauma, your brain isn't just trying to protect you from the pain of seeing the betrayal that's happening. Your brain is also trying to protect that attachment. Remember, betrayal trauma happens in institutions or with people that we have to rely on for survival or that we're attached to in some way. So your brain is trying to protect that attachment because it's trying to help you survive. It's trying to protect your sense of stability, safety, security. It is trying to protect your ability to keep functioning within that system or relationship. And sometimes the only way to do that is to make sure you don't fully see the betrayal for what it is. And that's what's called betrayal blindness. And if you're listening to this and you're starting to see your own relationship in this, I actually have a free masterclass where I break down the exact patterns narcissists use, how they pull you in, how they keep you stuck, why it's so hard to leave, even when you see the red flags. It's called the Narcissist Playbook, and I'll link that for you in the show notes. So I really want you to get this. Betrayal blindness is not you being naive. It is not proof of you being stupid. It's not you, quote, just missing the red flags. It's your brain doing its job to protect you. Here's what I mean even more specifically. If you're dependent on someone, if your survival, your stability, your identity, your sense of belonging is tied to that person, fully seeing their betrayal could shatter your world. Imagine a child who fully understands their parents are manipulative and sadistic, yet they have to go back to that house every night. Or a stay-at-home mom who has no idea how she would support herself and her kids if she left her abusive husband. Or a dad who knows if he left his cheating wife, she would do everything she could to take the kids and ruin his reputation. So your mind has so many reasons it's fighting to not see the betrayals that are happening, because to do so would mean that you either have to make really big changes in your life, like you may not be able to continue in that relationship, or at the least, you won't be able to look at that person in the same way. And it usually means grieving something really big. Maybe coming to terms that your marriage is never going to be what you hoped for, or that you're not going to be able to grow old together, or that you're going to end up repeating the cycle of your kids coming from a, quote, broken home, even though you wanted so badly to give them a stable life. Maybe you'll have to come to terms with the fact that your mother is jealous of you and she's never going to be that warm, nurturing person that you wanted her to be. So it's not that you're just being stupid and overlooking betrayals. It's really your mind trying to maintain the attachment and protect you from having to deal with something that's going to be really heavy, something that you aren't ready to see yet. And depending on where you are in life, that honestly might have been the safest thing for you. I think most of us can think back at different points in our lives and realize if we would have really seen the gravity, perhaps the danger, the harm of the situation we were in, it would have been absolutely debilitating. Sometimes in life, you're responsible for so much. You're doing so much, you're working, raising the kids, caring for elderly parents, dealing with stressors, dealing with health issues. You just don't have the bandwidth to also see the ways you're being betrayed. And your brain subconsciously knows that. So it subconsciously decides seeing this betrayal is going to be too much. You're not going to be able to keep functioning the way that you need to in life right now if you fully saw the betrayals that were happening. That's why your brain automatically engages in betrayal blindness to whoosh away the betrayals. But here's the nuance, is that it's not that you literally don't see the betrayal. It's that what you see doesn't get processed or labeled in your mind as a betrayal. So for example, let's say that your spouse lies to you. Instead of you seeing that lie and seeing it as the betrayal that it is, you relabel it as something else. You'll call it a misunderstanding. You'll decide that you're just overthinking. They didn't really mean it that way. If you find evidence that your partner's cheating on you, maybe you find flirty texts, you see their inappropriate behavior, you observe inconsistencies in their schedule. Your brain might kind of file it away as like something that doesn't make sense, something that doesn't quite add up yet, but you don't know what to do with it. So you don't really process it and think it through as a betrayal. Or you probably just decide, I'm reading into something that's not really there. You might even temporarily forget about it. You might temporarily forget that you saw it. You just move on with the busyness of life. You're helping kids, you're working, you're doing the laundry, you're doing all the things. I describe it almost like you're spinning around the room really fast. So you see the things that are there, but you don't look at them long enough to really compute what you're seeing. You're not standing still long enough to actually take in what you're seeing. So nothing fully registers. And that's what the brain is doing when you experience betrayals, and it's trying to protect you from that. And all of those moments, the things that don't make sense, the ones that don't add up, they don't just disappear. It's not like you just literally lost memory for them, because you saw them. Even if you temporarily forgot, these memories aren't gone. They get stored on your psychological shelf. It's like your mind takes all the betrayals, the weird comments they made, the gut feelings, the things that you found on their phone, the things that didn't add up, and it puts them on this psychological shelf. And it keeps doing that until eventually that shelf breaks. And when the shelf breaks, that's when usually a flood of memories come in, a cascade of betrayals come in. And you start saying things like, it all hit me at once. Now I can't unsee it. How did I not see it before? Because it becomes so big. In fact, your mind just starts combing back through all of the files and the memories and going, and that happened, and that happened, and that happened. It's like you start making connections. Sometimes it can come on very quickly and rapidly and can be overwhelming. So as we're talking about betrayal, I want to add another layer here that I think is really important, honestly not talked about enough, and that's the concept of betrayal violence. Betrayal violence is when someone intentionally withholds information from you. And because you don't have that information, you make decisions that you would not have made if you did know, if you did have all the information. So essentially, you are being harmed because you're being denied the ability to fully consent. And I want you to really let that sink in. Because a lot of people hear words like violence and they think that it has to be physical. But this is a form of violence where your autonomy is being violated. Your inherent right to make informed choices about your life, your body, your safety, that's being taken from you when people don't give you all the information for you to make a decision. So, for example, infidelity isn't just a betrayal. It's also betrayal violence, because if your partner is cheating on you and you don't know, you are making non-consensual decisions because you didn't have all the information. You're making decisions about your body, your health, your relationship without full information. You might be choosing to be physically intimate with them, not knowing there's a risk involved, not knowing that this agreement of exclusivity in the relationship has been broken. So your ability to consent is compromised. Or another example, let's say somebody's lying to you about finances. They're hiding things, they're hiding debt, they're secretly spending, they're making financial decisions that impact both of you, and you don't know. You don't know what they're hiding. So you might be agreeing to buy a house. You might be combining your finances. You might be making long-term life decisions based on incomplete or false information. That's not just them being dishonest, that is harm, because you are not given the full picture to make an informed choice. This really shows up in gaslighting too, because if someone is actively distorting your reality, you can't accurately assess what is happening. You cannot make grounded decisions. You're making choices based on the confusion that they are creating. And this is where it connects so deeply back to betrayal blindness, because your brain is already trying to whoosh away or soften what's happening to keep you safe and attached. And at the same time, the narcissist is actively keeping you in the dark. So there's this double layer happening here. Your brain is trying to protect the attachment by not fully seeing the betrayals, because it knows if you fully see it, you're going to have to make big decisions, or you're going to have to grieve something really big. And the narcissist is reinforcing that betrayal blindness by not being honest, by withholding information, by manipulating the narrative. And what that does over time is it erodes your ability to trust your perception, because you're constantly making decisions and then later realizing, oh, I didn't actually have all the information. So maybe there's something else I'm missing. Maybe there's things that I don't know. Maybe there's things I'm not seeing. So it puts you in this constant state of rumination and questioning yourself. That can create a really deep level of disorientation, because you're recognizing it's not just that, oh, this relationship hurt me. It's that I was literally making choices based on a reality that wasn't real. And that is very destabilizing. And if you're in that place right now where you're starting to see things clearly, you're starting to really see the signs, see the betrayals, but you also feel really overwhelmed. You feel disconnected from yourself. You're really not sure how to move forward. How do I put all these pieces together now that I'm seeing the betrayals, taking them down off that psychological shelf, but I don't know how to organize them in a coherent way to heal? That's exactly the work I do inside my program, Rewired for Resilience. It's designed to help you rebuild trust with yourself, know what to do with all these pieces so you can feel like a whole person again, so you can process what you've been through and actually feel grounded and clear. Not just understand it intellectually, but actually feel different. And I will link that in the show notes if you want more support. So this is why so many people come out of these relationships, come out of relationships with narcissists, where betrayal trauma is happening, betrayal violence is happening, and say things like, I don't trust myself anymore. I don't even know what's real. I feel like I consented to things and agreed to things that I wouldn't have agreed to had I known the truth. And that feeling is absolutely valid, because you were put in that position. You were put in a position where you were lied to. And then made decisions based on false or not all the information. So when you zoom out and look at narcissistic relationships through this lens, you are not talking about difficult dynamics or miscommunication. You are talking about repeated violations of trust, repeated distortions of reality, and repeated instances of betrayal violence, where you're making decisions about your life, your time, your energy, your body, your future without the information you actually needed to make these decisions safely and with full consent. And again, if you didn't fully see this at the time, if you minimized it, if you explained it away, that doesn't mean it was your fault, and it doesn't mean you were complicit in it and somehow deserve this. It means your brain was trying to keep you attached and functioning while you were in an environment where full truth wasn't available to you. So if you take anything from this episode, let it be this. You didn't stay because you were naive. You were navigating a situation where your brain was trying to protect you, your attachment, your stability, your sense of safety in the best way that it knew how. What you experienced has a name: betrayal trauma, betrayal blindness, and betrayal violence, which means the confusion you felt makes sense. The way that you explain things away makes sense. Even the fact that part of you saw it, but then another part of you didn't, and you couldn't fully act on it, makes sense. And that's a really important shift, because that's what can help you go from what's wrong with me to asking the question, what was my brain trying to protect me from? And that's where real self-trust can start to build. And until next time, remember that no matter where you are in your healing journey, resilience can be restored, and we'll keep building it together. So I'll see you in the next episode.